Welcome to the Mark Attwood Show, Adventures in the Cosmic Suit. Back in the kitchen and still in the yellow jumper. How you doing? Hope you're doing well. It's things are moving, things are happening, but really it all starts with us. And today I'm going to start with education. Talking about education. I've talked about education before. If you go to YouTube and you will see, if you type in the words quantum education, you'll see there's a video of me here from about 2 years ago, talking about this, because education has been on my mind for a long time. I've got 5 children, of course it is. My journey really with education started with in terms of understanding that the system was really getting things wrong. Started about 10, 15 years ago, watching people like Sir Ken Robinson. If you haven't heard of Ken Robinson, go and watch these TED Talks. They're absolutely brilliant. Unfortunately, Ken's no longer with us. But he talks about school killing creativity. This led me to unschooling, understanding about unschooling. This led me to setting up homeschools in Marrakesh for my kids. And this was really triggered by this, teachers in England telling me that my kids couldn't eat boiled eggs, or they couldn't take a day off school without being fined. In fact, I got threatened with prison last week by somebody at a school here in Ireland because my kids took too much time off. And I said to them, well, that's because you brought in mask mandates for kids, and that's child abuse, and I'm not bringing my kids in. Look, I would be homeschooling my own kids now, but I'm separated. That's a battle I can't win right now. But it is a subject that I think is extremely important, because the system is failing us and our children on every level. So that led me to get an email from one of my lovely subscribers who told me about David Adelman. And I found him online, and I reached out to him after I bought this book, which I'm going to show you here. There's David. Sorry, I went a bit quick there. And there's his book, School, No Place for Children. So without further ado, please welcome David. Hello, David. How are you?
I'm great, thank you, Mark. And it's really timely, this conversation, especially with what's been offered to you, nice kind offer of a prison sentence. So people out there are waking up in en masse now, because they're realizing that the schooling system is not what it is promoted as by any means. And I'm really understating it now.
You are understating it. I mean, I could smell the rot. I mean, it wasn't great when I was a kid, to be honest. I mean, they vaccinated me. My earliest memory is being carried by my ear by my headmaster in agony. They've never been nice places, really, have they?
No, they haven't. They've been very sterile, very clinical, very imposing, very intimidating. And I'm currently on tour doing a reminder, basically scratching below the surface of people's psyche, because the brain is very kind to us. It actually forces us to forget the traumas and the harms and the indignities that we've suffered at school, as they were evolving into basically prison boot camps. I mean, they are literally, in my book that you very kindly highlighted, School, No Place for Children, I describe schools as like prisons, but now I would go way beyond that. They are prisons, and they have been for some time. So yeah, this is the problem, that we're sending children unwittingly to a prison.
Well, I remember I grew up in a village called Bugbrook in Northamptonshire, and I've not been there for a while, but the last time I went there, I took a walk around the village, and there's a number of things I noticed. Firstly, back in the 70s when I grew up, everybody knew each other, and my aunt and uncle lived there, and they said they don't know their neighbors anymore. And I went on the walk that I used to do to get to my primary school, and it's all fenced off. It used to be just open fields. We'd run around playing cricket and football and rugby and everything else, all fenced off. You can't. It's like Fort Knox, and there's absolutely no reason for it.
No, there isn't, and it makes you wonder, what are they protecting children from? And when you do the calculations, you're realizing they are protecting the children from friends and neighbors. In other words, they're keeping the children at a distance from where they could be given a more benevolent influence, that they could have and have some fun. They're fencing them off, as you said, so that they can manipulate them, indoctrinate them safely. So the safety is all about the system. It's all about protecting the system and maintaining the system from generation to generation. It really is quite. It beggars belief that it's bad enough that people send their boys and girls to school, but some of them can't even conceive of an alternative, which is quite incredible.
Yeah, well, I said my wife and I at the time set up homeschooling when we moved to Marrakesh, and we were there for about 4 years. And we did use a curriculum, but the kids were free and they were outside all the time, and they were, in the pool, they were on trampolines, they were having fun. But they did, when we moved to Ireland about 5 years ago, they were years ahead, and then very quickly became years behind. And during COVID and the lockdowns, I tried my damnedest to get parents together to say, look, there is an alternative to this, but none of them would. I got 3 or 4 people. I couldn't get any more people together, and it was ridiculous because nobody. You're absolutely right. People just can't conceive that there's a different way of doing this.
Yeah, it's someone on Facebook a few years ago pointed out the delicious irony that when you say to a mum or dad, and I hesitate to use the word parent because that's when you know legalese, it's a pair of renters.
Yeah.
So renting out their kids to or the kids being rented out to the state. When someone pointed out that, in fact, when parents say, in inverted commas, when mums and dads say that, no, we're not qualified, we can't do this job. And this woman pointed out the irony that, well, is it because you went to school that you don't feel qualified to be an educator?
Mm.
Yeah, and there's a delicious irony there. So what we need to do is just break this vicious cycle. And COVID, bless it, and I do bless it, I can tell you, because it's a gift that keeps on giving, has enabled some of us, hopefully more and more as time goes by, to break this cycle and make us realize that schooling is an environment in which children routinely get humiliated and abused. And now they're being hypersexualized. And so it's making it obvious. What wasn't so obvious before is now completely obvious. And I would say that the number of boys and girls kept out of school has doubled in this country in the last 2 years. It was roughly when COVID started, alleged COVID, because I don't believe in that nonsense, and as I'm sure your listeners wouldn't. When the alleged COVID started, I think there was about 150,000 boys and girls kept at home. And my guess is about the 300,000 now. So we're past the 250,000 mark. I think the government would admit to 150,000. So they would admit to about half of them. And I think that if we can get to 500,000, we will have the critical mass that will mean that no one can say, oh, we're the only ones. How are we supposed to socialize our boy or girl? Well, very soon there'll be another boy or girl at home on the next street or even on the same street, because 500,000 will be a critical number. And I think that day is not long off.
Yeah, well, that day is what Malcolm Gladwell would call the tipping point, and that is what you've mentioned there with the socializing is by far the hardest thing for me with my kids because my eldest son was not having fun, hated wearing a mask, and I hated seeing him with the mask, and he was going to a grammar school, and every night he was coming home, he was depressed, and I was talking to him about what he was learning, and it was just outrageous that these teachers were. They spend 20 minutes talking about how much they hated Trump just before a physics class or a chemistry class. It was ridiculous. And then you've got, LGBTQ weeks going on in the west of Ireland, in the middle of a farming community. It's absolutely ridiculous. And then there are just bonkers things that these teachers are implementing. And I said at the beginning that I got invited. In fact, I didn't just get invited to school. They came and knocked at my door 3 times and forced me to download an app, which is where the homework and everything else and all the excuses for kids missing class come in. And then asked me very firmly to come and have a meeting with the social services people because my kids had missed so much school last year because we did take them out. That was a battle I didn't have to fight with my ex, because she agreed with it. Because when they brought mask mandates in for kids here, there was just no way. And I really, really wanted to get my kids out of school, but they really don't want to, because they want to be with their mates. And that's been the toughest thing. Have you found the same thing with parents? Sorry, not parents, with mums and dads that you spoke to?
Yes, there is a lot. There is a lot of that feeling that they would be letting their boys or girls down by depriving them of their mates. But there's strong counter arguments. Let me just tell you an anecdote from a few years ago. I was in a cafe and I was discussing my book with a friend of mine. So we were on the theme of education, and the waitress came over, and I just said to her, "By the way, how did you enjoy school? Did you enjoy school?" I said to the waitress, because I was just kind of canvassing for the book. And she said, "Yeah, loved school." And I thought to myself, I'm not having that, because having done the research and having had the experiences that I've had, both as a pupil and as a teacher, I thought there's more to this than meets the eye. She gave that answer too quickly. So she went away and came back a few minutes later, and she said, "You know what? The way that you asked that question has made me think that maybe I didn't." And I was starting to remember that, in fact, I hated school. I just hated it, she said. But all I could think of was, when you asked the question, was the fun I had with my mates.
Yeah.
So what it is, that the brain protects us. It doesn't want us to hold on to trauma for too long. And we only remember, obviously, if it's a very dramatic single event, we'll remember that. But if it's this micro torture, this low level, low grade insult to the system, insult to your character, your personality, your gifts, your talents, your individuality, that's sustained for 10 to 15 years, before you know it, you come away with this, what I call complex, well, I don't call it, but some other people do, and I've taken on this descriptor, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which we all have. And the theme of my current round of talks is exposing this complex PTSD to the audience. Some of them you can see are squirming because they realize it's true, and therefore opening out the opening a gateway to make everyone believe, well, if we suffered without realizing it, what are we putting our boys and girls through? So this is another way that we can undermine this narrative of you have to send them to school for socialization. And the mainstream people who are on our path will know why, but the mainstream is not doing any surveys into socialization in schools, because they know that it's actually an anti-socialization process. If you talk in class, it's disruptive and it gets penalized. You don't even talk to other classes because they're your competition. So there is the divide and conquer principle. So the mainstream doesn't do surveys on socialization, but there's a little known study in Canada, which I quote in my book, which shows that if you want to be socialized properly, stay away from school. They compared two groups, one schooled of kids and one home educated. The home educated kids came out way more mature, way more confident, way more intelligent, and they themselves kept away from the schooled children, saying things like, they're just babies, they're just gossiping nonsense, and they're bullies. So really, the classroom is a place where boys and girls are starved of oxygen. And so if you're starved of oxygen in real life, you'll get brain damage. And that's exactly what happens in school. Probably don't have time to go into it now. I do go into it in the book, and I go into it in more detail in my talks. But basically, it's a system of insult and injury to the brain and to the personality, to the psyche, and ultimately to the soul. And this is where what people are realizing more and more is, we all think of the Fourth Reich as represented by WEF, World Economic Forum. They're just the tip of the iceberg. The real Fourth Reich is being implemented in schools.
Mm-hmm.
That is where catch them when they're young is what is the ancient wisdom. Yeah, the Jesuit wisdom. Get them till the age of 7, you've got them. So what I say, tongue in cheek, that if you really have to send a boy or girl to school, make sure they're old enough to defend themselves. And I recommend a minimum age for schooling of 25. because your brain is fully developed. Then you're safe. It's safe to go to school when you're 25, but
Yeah.
no earlier than that. Obviously, I'm exaggerating for comic effect, but really, we shouldn't. We have no business sending our boys and girls to school. And then there's a counter argument. Well, I'm a single parent, and if I don't work, blah blah blah. Well, that's the next level. We're going to create, and we are creating infrastructure to deal with that, because as more and more people realize what's going on, they will pull away, and we will create our own infrastructures, and they're already being created.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I didn't finish the story about my eldest son. He was obviously being taught a load of bollocks, and I actually, when I drop my kids off to school, I say, "Have a nice day at prison."
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I say it every day. And when I pick them up, I say, "How was prison today?" And then they laugh. But then, I'm keeping them thinking like that because, and also the stress that they go through with exams. I'm like, these exams are completely irrelevant. Don't worry about it. And, one of my daughters was crying about them the other week. And I was like, you don't need to do this. And I tried to talk them out of university. I said, if you want to go to university, go when you're older, because then you'll know what you're doing and blah, blah, blah. They're just keeping you in the system that you don't need to go there. Go and build a business. I teach them how to build a business, but they stay off. It's so strong, this tide for a lot of the kids. My eldest did actually leave school early and followed his dream. He wanted to become a sailor, and he's now off to Greece later this year to do a sailing job. And while all his mates are really jealous, saying, "Well, I wish we could have left school," but their parents won't let them, and it's such indoctrination and brainwashing. It is a subject that's very close to my heart. But I'm interested in how you got to this point to publish a book like this, because you're what's your background? Legal?
Yes, trained academic law. So I did law at university, then went on to qualify as a lawyer, technically known as a solicitor in this country, attorney in the US. And but with my mindset, I have a kind of I default to free spiritedness. So I need fresh air, oxygen, and the ability to make sovereign choices. That's just my need. And when you're working behind a desk with client after client coming in, and you've got to service their needs for a pitiful trainee wage, you start thinking, well, and I'm in a prison. I'm behind a desk. I'm doing time, and I haven't committed a crime. And I'm thinking,
Hmm.
this is not right. So I'm already plotting my escape. So I just hang on in there long enough to get my paper qualification, because I think, well, maybe that might stand me in, that's my backup, my go-to backup one day if I ever need it. So I got out. I'm still in my early to mid 20s, and I started delivering parcels, and I was so happy. And I'm in London delivering parcels. People can't understand why I'm delivering parcels with such a beaming smile on my face, because I'm breathing fresh air and no one's breathing down my neck. Now, funnily enough, 40 years on, they are breathing down courier drivers' necks, because everything is being automated, and they're literally throwing parcels at your front door because they haven't got time to hand them to you.
Yeah.
It's the insanity of the matrix system these days is just beggars belief. Anyway, so I deliver parcels for a few years, and I'm now beginning to feel that I need to learn a foreign language. I'd learned two at school, but I hadn't kept them up particularly, French and German. And I thought, what about Spanish? Because I never made it to Spain when I did a Euro rail trip in my mid 20s. So I went off to Spain in my early 30s now, and learning the language, and my money ran out, and I thought, now what? And the obvious thing to do, in fact, pretty much the only thing you can do when your Spanish is pretty crappy, but you're an English native, is teach English as a foreign language.
Hmm.
So that's what I did. So that was my first, I would say, professional experience as a teacher. I had done some ad hoc tuition before when I was much younger, but it didn't really count. So I started to observe over a period of a few years how, I thought my Spanish was bad until I heard their English. So that was actually quite reassuring. I thought, good grief, my Spanish is bloody amazing compared to their English. And the difference is I'm in Spain, so my Spanish can improve. They're not in England or in America. Their English is not improving. So I already started to see the difference between academic excellence, and they were all excellent. They'd all got their certificates of proficiency in English, but they couldn't speak a bloody word, and they certainly didn't understand me. So I'm getting a disconnect. Hang on a minute. They say that they are qualified in English, and yet they can't handle my language. So I ask a few questions, such as, "Who taught you English?" And it always turned out to be someone from Spain with an academic English qualification. Then I start to join the dots. So I'm about early 30s still. So I'm already starting to join the dots. Okay, I get it. So you're receiving English from someone qualified. And for those who've been to one of my talks, they know that qualification and qualify is not as good as the real thing. You know, which do you prefer, a success or a qualified success? So the system's already telling you not to expect very much when you're qualified, because you're not the real thing. You're not authentic. Anyway, so my time in Spain runs out because my Spanish got quite good. And I thought, well, that'll do for me. I can pull away now. And I reached the glass ceiling that unless your Spanish is absolutely spot on, bilingual, perfect, there's no work for you there. You just have to keep teaching English, or maybe do a bit of translation or bit of dubbing, you know, for the film and TV industry. So found myself back in England, and it wasn't long before I was teaching again, this time bridge, which is my lifelong passion, the famous card game bridge, the greatest game in the world, bar none. And there's no one here on who's, I'm looking in the chat box, so there's only me and you, so no one can argue. Right?
I'd say it was chess, but you know, bridge is good.
Yeah. Okay. All right, I'll forgive you. I'll keep going. Anyway, so I was teaching bridge informally to begin with, and then the local bridge club, actually quite a famous bridge club, Manchester Bridge Club, got wind of what I was doing and invited me to become their senior beginners tutor. And then, long story short, the national body got wind of what I was doing, and I was invited to respond to their funding. They got some third-party funding, and they said, "We've been funded to take bridge into schools." And I thought, oh, that sounds interesting. So I didn't have much competition, so I was awarded the funding. But the problem was, you can't take bridge into schools because it's too mature a game. It's too complex. But what you can do is take a simplified version into schools. And that is the French and Dutch mini bridge, which is simplified bridge. But what I found, which is quite sad for the British, is that the simplified European version still wasn't simple enough. Now, to be fair to us, I was going in mainly to primary schools. So what I did was I reinvented the wheel, and I made le mini bridge, the French version, even more simple. So it was accessible to the youngest kids were 6 or 7, but the average appropriate age was 8 to 9 or even 10. Anyway, that was going reasonably well. In fact, it was going a bit too well, because I got confirmation from some schools that they had adopted it and that they'd put it into the curriculum mainly for social and emotional purposes: conflict resolution, personal confidence, boosting self-esteem, relating to self, relating to others, because it's a social game. Whatever else bridge is, it's a social game played 2 against 2 round a table with 4 people around that table. So I said to the funders, who they'd initially sent me in as a kind of quasi maths teacher, but primary teachers said to me within a very short space of time, "David, we've done 1 session and we can see the maths in session 1. What about session 2? And I racked my brains and thought, no, there's only enough maths in bridge for 1 session, or mini bridge, or even bridge. So I said to the funders, this has only got legs if we shift the goalposts. And they said, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, there's a school in Leeds that are now using it in curriculum time for SEAL, social and emotional aspects of learning. And the Americans call that SEL, because I know you've got an American audience. So that's social and emotional learning, SEL. So my funders, being some kind of combination of psychopath, Mason, narcissist, and just generally over materialistic left brainers, it got nowhere. I'm cutting quite a long story short. So my application got nowhere for us to shift the goalposts. They were rigid in their insistence that it had to be a maths add-on, and I said no, that's not happening. So they pulled funding, and I wrote a report telling them the error of their ways, and of course that got ignored. And the overall resentment led me to write a little report, really a report to self. And I showed it to a few people, and they said, why didn't you amplify that and make a book out of it? So I made an ebook out of it. And then someone said, that's not bad, but what about other people's anecdotes? So I filled it out with my stuff, other people's stuff. And then by this time I'd done more research. And long story short, it became School No Place for Children. And the third edition I made as a tribute to someone that I know you've mentioned Ken Robinson, but the other massive figure in this movement, if it is a movement, is John Taylor Gatto, author of Weapons of Mass Instruction and Get Your Kids Out of Public School Now. So my third edition was a tribute to him. And what I would say is that I only met his work after I'd basically written the first two editions, well, certainly the first edition. And and he is the American voice of reason, if I am the British voice of reason. And the thing about him is that he was actually a high school teacher for 30 years. So he was writing with supreme authority, because he knows, he's lived every day of his life for 30 years exactly what the schooling system does to kids.
Yeah.
And so I don't know whether I've taken his work further, but I think I've possibly taken it deeper, because there's quite a lot of psychology in my book, you know, giving people insight into what it could have done to them. And there's also somebody else on the scene, a Spanish woman who's also talks about the dangers of globalized schooling. To be fair, I can't recall her precise name right now, but there aren't many of us. We're a little niche. We're a little niche group, and John Taylor Gatto is now deceased, so there's even fewer, you know. And then there were two.
Yeah, no, I forgot to mention John Taylor Gatto, but I did look at his work a lot as well. And I also came across this work about 10 or 12 years ago, which I just want to share for the audience, especially the Americans, because there's a book here called The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America by Charlotte Isabit.
Charlotte Isabit gets a mention in my book as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and she works in the education department under Reagan, so she was highly qualified to talk about this as well.
Yeah,
if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Well, I'm really glad you're doing this, and I'm glad that you. And if I can get this to a wider audience, I think everybody should go and buy this book. Right, the link's there, thepeopleslawyeruk.com. Go and buy the book, read it.
Can I just say something? Can I just say something about the book?
Yeah.
Well, some people have read the book and immediately pulled their boys and girls out of school, like without hesitation. It's a powerful book. Obviously, as the author, I would say that, but I don't say that lightly. I'm not saying that just because I'm the author of this book. Someone, a youngish man, no, actually a young man who read the book, said to me afterwards that he had always assumed that his dysfunction was down to his parenting and family life. Then he read my book and he said, actually, it wasn't my family. They loved me. They may not have been great, but they loved me. It was my schooling. Because at school, there's no compensatory love or attention or affection. There's nothing. No. It's pretty much all bad news. So, and this is what the book brings home. It's we are cracking open that route to truth. And it is beginning to crack under the nonsense that's more and more obvious now that's going on. And people have to, I mean, I gave a talk yesterday in Exeter, and some people came up to me afterwards in tears saying, David, you're making me realize what all this is about. And we really do need to protect future generations. At the end of the day, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, it's not about us. It really isn't. It's about generations coming, and we
Yeah.
must not allow the schooling system to get anywhere near them.
Totally agree. This is a spiritual war. Everything's been weaponized against all of us, from your shoes to your water to the paint in your living room. And school is a massive part of this because I mean, the only reason I studied hard at school is because I wanted to get in the RAF and I had to get a certain number of O levels. But as soon as I ended up I ended up at Manchester Poly actually, and I did economics. And in the last year I did about 4 hours of lectures because I just realised what a complete fucking waste of time it was. And I still got a Desmond Tutu. 4 hours in 1 year.
You've picked up a Manchester sense of humour, Mark. I can tell it a mile off.
Well, I did spend 27 years there, so yeah,
Yeah.
I suppose I had to. But
Born and bred, mate. Born and bred Mancunian.
yeah, whereabouts?
North Manchester, sort of Whitefield,
Oh yeah,
Salford,
yeah,
Blakely, sort of all round about Heaton Park.
yeah. I know it well. I'm going back in April on the 15th to do a live version of this show. If you want to come along,
What date?
15th of April at Gorton Monastery.
That might be possible because I'm doing my northern tour starts round about the 14th, and I've got to be in St Anne's on the 17th. I think that's very possible that I can be there. Yeah.
No, I'd love it if you came along. Have you been to the monastery?
Been to the monastery, absolutely. I used to be a regular there.
It's amazing.
Just as a punter. I did do some talks, but my ranking was too low for them to give me the main hall. They gave me Sideshow Bob. You know,
the toilet down the corridor.
Yeah. Oh God.
If you'd come along to that, it'd be brilliant. We've got Matt Letitia coming. We've got Tara Janine coming from Canada. We've got Tom Numbers. There's going to be an amazing show.
And what's the theme?
Well, it's called my show's called Adventures in a Cosmic Suit, and it's called Adventures in a Cosmic Suit Live. We did one there in I think it was October, and it was an amazing day. And this one's going to be a live version of this show. So it's like amazing guests on stage meeting people. It's really about getting people together, because I think I got locked down for 2 years like everybody else, and then last year I traveled all over America, Morocco, and England. In fact, I'm leaving for England tonight to go and do a talk in Buxton tomorrow. And I think it's so important that people get together at this time, especially after being locked down, because it's great having chats like this on online. It's great having YouTube channels or whatever, but when you actually get in a room with somebody, it's very, very powerful, and it gives people confidence as well. Have you found that with your tours and talks recently?
Well, what I'm doing is I'm making my online course, which is in privacy and universal and natural law rights. I'm automating that to free me up to be actually physically more and more with the people.
Great.
Because there's no point otherwise I might as well call myself the online people's lawyer.
Yeah.
So if I don't want to have any issues with trade description or with inauthenticity, I've got to be out there. And judging by the response that I'm getting from people, it's appropriate and it's working, because you can go some way towards changing someone's mind by appearing on their computer screen. It can possibly happen, but you can absolutely give them a total battering if you're there in person.
Yeah. And, I'm pointing people to your website again, because it's absolutely packed with really useful stuff. It's not just a place to buy the book. It's a place to go and read. You've got all these pages here. You've got the online course here. You've got tons of resources. It's a really excellent website. So you guys watching, go and have a look at that as well. Don't just go to buy the book, but make sure you buy the book. And when you do buy the book, start talking about it with other people, because this is how ideas spread. Because we've just been through the biggest psychological operation in history. It's a war on, and they're coming for our children, and they want us. And it goes most of my audience understand this, right? So I'm not going to go into details of what's really going on with children worldwide underground, but what is going on above ground in the schools is just as bad. And this is, I've talked about sovereignty for quite a number of years. I first came across the idea of sovereignty, I think, about 10 years ago. And I tried to launch myself as the sovereign entrepreneur, a bit like the people's lawyer, because I've been teaching business and marketing for years. And it just didn't go anywhere because they just didn't understand what the word sovereign meant. But it's one of those words that's definitely become higher in the consciousness in the last 3 years because we've all become experts in health, natural health. Well, not all of us, but a lot of us have had to now understand more about what goes into our body, how things like this work and what they actually contain. And, we are becoming more sovereign. There's still a load of people fast asleep going, nah, but the rest of us are becoming more sovereign. But it's the discussion of the ideas that I think is fundamentally important face to face. Because people, if I look at my YouTube videos, the average length of if I do an average length of an hour, the average watch time is 20 minutes, which means they're missing out on most. How far are we into this? 36 minutes. So there's 15 minutes that most people are missing already in this chat, and it could get more and more interesting. This is what happens. So that's why I like to get them in a room when they can't escape.
It's going to get to a point where halfway through the program, you'll say, if you keep watching the second half, we'll send you some money.
Well, that's what they do on radio shows and TV shows already. I just like to give people the respect that their intelligence can handle and their attention span can go into this. But sorry, go on. Yep.
I just want to while they're fresh in my mind, speak to two issues that you've just highlighted. One is lockdown and the other is sovereignty. I'm just cataloging so I make sure I remember. Now, you say that it sounds like you did endure, with a D, some kind of lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
And you can maybe elaborate on that if you want. But one thing I would say urgently to people listening, I didn't do a lockdown on any level. So-called lockdown made absolutely no difference to my life. Now, obviously, I couldn't eat at a restaurant that was closed. I mean, that's just taking miracles too far. But I was outdoors more than I was indoors. I was traveling on buses, trains. I was leading a completely normal life. And it was weird. It was Weirdsville in being in the center of Manchester. I've since moved out of Manchester, but back then I was in Manchester, being in the center of a great city with nobody there but you. There was me, one dog, and one traffic warden. Can you believe a traffic warden in a lockdown? That's how some people, how locked into their job's worthiness some people are. So when the next lockdown comes, and it is coming, what we need is mass civil disobedience based on the experience of people like myself who don't listen to whatever the mainstream is trying to tell us, because you can challenge it very easily. We're not going to go into that right now. But if you want to know how to challenge mainstream dogma and affronts and assaults on your sovereignty, watch the videos online on the website. They're there so that people don't need to do a course. But if you want more in-depth knowledge, you can sign up for the course. Now, the other thing I wanted to highlight was the concept of sovereignty. And in my current talks that I'm doing around the country, I stress the essential difference between a slave and a sovereign is that a slave needs permission and a sovereign does not. So I didn't need permission to be out and about during a lockdown. They said that we did, but we didn't. And sovereigns know that they don't need permission. Slaves do. And I have this frothy, light-hearted example. When you go to someone's house, the way that you can tell where you are on the spectrum. And if you come to one of my talks, I've got a little bit more of a scientific quiz that will tell you where you are on the spectrum. And if you arrive at someone's house and you feel that you need to use their loo or toilet or bathroom, for the Americans, if you find yourself saying, "Excuse me, do you mind if I use your bathroom?" That's slave mentality. But if you find yourself saying, "Excuse me, could you tell me where the bathroom is?"
Mm-hmm.
That's sovereign mentality. And it sounds like a bit of a crazy example, but this is a nice, quick barometer of where you are or where people are on the spectrum. And since it's a spectrum, you can slide up and down it. You know, I've had people come to my talks multiple times and say to me, well, when I first did your test, your slave sovereign test, I was much nearer to slave. And a few weeks later, just literally weeks, not even months, I've put in some changes. I've adopted some changes, and I'm much closer to sovereign. So we are so powerful. Once we become conscious of the problem, we're already halfway to solving it.
100%. And everybody watching this, it's about you taking action. Go to the website, read the stuff, go to the meetings. Where are your meetings coming up? Because I'm going to publish this on Monday, and if people are near you, I want them to know where you are.
Okay, right. It's top of my head, but that shouldn't be a problem because I've been looking at it for ages now. So this coming Tuesday, so we're now on Monday, the 23rd of January. So tomorrow, Tuesday, 24th of January, Totnes. And if you need more details, just go on the events page on thepeopleslawuk.com. Then there's a little breather, and then Sunday, the 29th of January, Bude in Cornwall at the Crackington Institute. Then the day after, Barnstaple, North Devon. I call it Barnstaple. Barnstaple, North Devon. That's in the evening of Monday the 30th. And then a little breather. And then on Thursday, the 2nd of February, Stroud, at the Old Convent in Stroud, again in the evening. So further details on the website events page. You can subscribe to the website. You'll get, in fact, you'll get an update later today to give you details on forthcoming talks. They're very dynamic, very engaging, and you will surprise yourself at your attention span, because the talk is about you. It's about you, whoever's listening or watching. It's not about me. Well, it's about all of us, really. So when people find that they're listening about themselves, it engages them naturally. They're not listening to dry facts, dry information that may or may not apply directly or indirectly to. This is very much about the journey that we've all been on through this abusive system called schooling. And this is one of the main branches of the awakening process, because it all starts at school.
Mm. Now, you also said something interesting there. You said another lockdown's coming. What have you got in your head?
Well, I'm not directly linked to 77 Brigade or whoever knows what's happening, or WF. It's just based on intuition and joining the dots. But the thing is that they have to double down on whatever they're doing. On many levels, we need to celebrate that, because those who still aren't awake, every time they come in hard at us, it gives another few million a chance to wake up.
Mm-hmm.
So really, it's a cause for celebration. It could be a climate lockdown, but it's more likely to be. Remember that they've just done a tabletop exercise in SIRS, I think it is. It's a severe respiratory. I'm paraphrasing. It's one of those, and they're saying that it could kill as many as 20 million children worldwide, or 50 million, or whatever. So what they're going to do, they're going to, in my opinion, this is just only my opinion, they're going to take the actual deaths from the original rollout of the SARS-CoV jab, use that, massage them a bit, inflate them a bit, and then shoot images of people dropping, sudden deaths, put it all together in an app, packaged up, send it out on the BBC, make people, and they'll say things like, well, we weren't exactly accurate in the past when we said it was a dangerous pathogen. Get us all on board thinking that they're finally telling the truth. And then in the next breath, they'll say, but this one is for real. And Bill Gates has already said that. Yeah. He said, quote, the next one will certainly get their attention.
Yeah.
So people are going to think that there really is, even those who have seen through the COVID nonsense, that they're really going to be made to feel and think that this thing, let's just call it a thing, is for real. And if it happens on a school day, it will mean schools will be locked down. They've done lockdown drills, and that's when the nasal sprays and the injections, the sterilizing agents will come out, because ultimately there's only one agenda. It's to stop the human race from procreating. It's to stop all procreation and basically clean up the mess and bring in transhuman. I'm simplifying it basically, but artificial intelligence wants to take over. That also explains why the schooling system is only suitable for robots, not for human boys and girls. And the robotization is happening, but it will need people to stop producing real life boys and girls. So the quickest way to do that is to lock down and sterilize the boys and girls. And I personally, but again, only my personal opinion, but it makes sense to me, because I feel that I'm aware of the end game, which is to see off humanity as we know it. And that's not a great revelation. I think a lot of us, certainly those watching this show, will be aware of that. So it's to see off humanity and replace it with trans humanity, whatever they decide that means in the future. So say, look, humans, you're dying off, but we can give you eternal life if you just take this pill. So so really, it's not in my mind, it's not if, it's or whether, it's when. So everything that I do now is geared towards preparing myself and others and anyone that will listen to me for the next big one, the storm, the real storm.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I got this, I don't know if you can see my screen. I got this email yesterday.
Yeah, go on.
I can. Yeah, I don't know if you can see it properly there.
Yes, I can actually. Yeah.
Okay. Which I think this originated from Whiplash 347, but it said, I've been advised by very good sources to warn that lockdown is imminent. Exact date not defined. However, it is tipped we'll go into it early to mid next week. This is a worldwide event and will be up to 30 days. And it will be a complete shutdown for the first 72 hours. Petrol stations will be closed, have cash on hand, blah, blah, blah. Now, this version of lockdown is a positive one, because it's supposed to be the one that the white hats come in and arrest everybody. And it is a good thing that we are locked down at that time, because they're being flushed out. That's my I'm an apocalyptimist. So I've been aware of the transhuman agenda for 10 years at least. I've been aware of the protocols of the Elders of Zion for 24 years at least. I've read all the books that you can possibly read on all of this stuff. But for some reason, I'm still very optimistic about the outcome for the human race. How are you? Where are you at on that spectrum?
I tend much more towards your apocalyptimism. But I do feel that it's not quite as simple as that. And the beast, remember the beast, we're talking about the ultimate in narcissism. That's what the beast is. It's the archetypal narcissist. And the narcissist's view on things and life is, if I can't have it, or if I can't have them, so it meaning the planet and them meaning us, if I can't have it or them, nobody's going to have them and nobody's going to have it. So it is hell-bent. And so bringing those two wills together, the main reason why there's going to be shit shows galore happening, there already are, of course, is precisely because the beast has already lost. And so because it's lost, it's doing as much damage as it can on its way out. So it's I see a kind of mixed package. Yes, there are movements that are cleaning up the child sex abuse and the human trafficking. I have secondhand knowledge of that, not firsthand, but secondhand. In other words, people who I trust have told me that they've got evidence that is going on.
Yeah.
And yet at the same time, the beast does what the beast has to do. And it's pretending, because the beast is delusional. So it's pretending to itself that it can still win.
Yeah.
Or at least it can have a bit of a giggle by causing total havoc on its way out. The ultimate shits and giggles routine, isn't it?
Mm.
And so we're going to get, I think we're going to get a bit of everything, to be honest, Mark. We're going to get a bit of everything, which is why one of my screens in my talks goes something like, positivity is not, how does it go? Being positive does not rely on positive outcomes. It relies on staying positive, whatever the outcomes.
Yeah.
So we lose our attachment to positive outcomes, but we stay positive because we know that we are going to be fine, whatever the apparent. Most of these outcomes will only be apparent. Some of them will be real. Some of them will be fake. So in all that confusion and chaos, we just need to stay focused on ourselves and significant others, on our community, on our connections, on our truths, with just one eye, the peripheral vision on external events, just enough to guide us through this tunnel of death and emergent light that's coming. So the world is toxic, and it needs a root and branch cleanse, and you can't have that without massive loss of life, massive loss of sanity, massive loss of many things. They're necessary.
Yeah.
They're absolutely necessary. So bring it on.
Let's have
Bring
it.
it on. Let's have it.
Let's have
Come
it,
on.
lads.
Let's have it. Yeah.
Have it.
But we're ready.
We are.
And all those, and what I call, the fluffy bunny crowd, bless them. We need them because they're the ones that meditate and raise the collective frequency. But what I try to tell them in my less humble moments, and we all fall from grace occasionally, is take your head out from under your arse.
Yeah.
And look around at what's actually going on, not what you wish was going on. Because you cannot wish nirvana or utopia. You have to work steadily and meticulously towards it.
Yeah.
But having said that, I'd say to them, keep doing your meditations, keep thinking positively, because that's good. Don't get me wrong. It's not bad, but it's not enough. That's all I say to these people, and I call it bypassing, spiritual bypassing. When you think, if you just go long enough, everything will be fine. And I've got an example from lockdown. There was a group of almas in Manchester and I said to them, you need to be careful because you're gathering in a lockdown. You're going to get raided. And they said, no, we're fine. We're above all that. Sure enough, next thing you know, the riot police are raiding them and they're calling me, David, you need to come with us to the police station. And we resolved it because they were just being made an offer to pay a fine. I said, it's only an offer. You don't have to pay it. It's just an offer. By paying it, you go into contract. But if you don't want to pay it, I'm putting my people's online lawyer hat on now, but there you go. So, yeah. So stay optimistic, folks, because optimism is always justified. But just be mindful of other factors that are going to be in play. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I've been having that discussion with a few people over the last 10 years. There's quite a famous person in England who would rip into me because I was talking about all this stuff on Facebook and in private circles. And she kept saying, it's an inside job. It's an inside job. I said, I know it's an inside job, but you need to know what the fucking enemy is up to because we have to face it. It's not, it is an inside job, but it's also there. And so I've always been sort of like, we have to know about satanic ritual abuse. We have to know about what the royal family were really up to. We have to understand how bad the media is, really understand it. And we have to learn common law and we have to learn about how to heal ourselves. We can't rely upon the medical institutions. And we have to be pragmatic and we have to become sovereign. That's what it's all about. Then you can go and meditate and do that at the same time. So we're 100% aligned. And I just implore you guys watching to go. David's absolutely brilliant. And all of the stuff on his website is brilliant. Go and get his book, share it, discuss it with people. Go and see him live if you can. And we're going to speak again, David, because it's been an absolute pleasure to meet you.
I'm getting tingles up the spine, Mark, which means that we're onto something.
Yeah.
So it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. And now that we're on the same path more. I was aware of you, but I was a bit too busy to watch some of your shows, and so I'll be tuning into you more because I really love what you're doing as well. So it's a mutual thing. This.
No, it's very it's the wonderful part of all of this. Thank you, COVID, again for this. Because it's the big. I've been saying for a while that COVID is like the biggest blessing to humanity ever because we now know who everybody is.
Can I just say what yesterday it just occurred to me to say in front of my audience? Do you know, sometimes I regret the fact that COVID doesn't exist. It actually pisses me off because if it did exist, I would like to send it a card, a thank you card.
I'll take it for a pint.
Yeah.
Coming down the pub, COVID, or what? Oh God, yeah. Well, I'm sure we'll meet in the future. But if you've ever got anything you want to promote or anything, just email me and come on the channel. I've got to go and do this talking. I'm in England next week, but I'm on the other end of the country, so I won't be able to meet you next week.
Okay.
But it would be great if you could get to Manchester on the 15th. It's going to be an amazing.
Well, I will. I can make sure. To be honest, Mark, I can absolutely morally guarantee that I will be there.
Great. Well, you're going to meet a lot of amazing people there, so that'd be brilliant.
Do you want me as one of the guests, or do you want?
Yeah. I want to get you on stage and we'll have a chat.
Oh, well, then I can. It's more than moral now. It's almost legal. There's the.
Yeah. I made you an offer. You can choose to accept it or not.
Absolutely, I'll be there. I will be there, Mark.
Bring some books.
And I'll be on tour, so I'll have all the kit. I'll have all the books and all the.
Sorry, yeah, I'm launching a book that day as well. It's a poetry book about the last 2 years.
Okay.
It's called Musings of an Apocalyptimist: Spiritual War Poems 2020 to 22.
Yeah. Okay. Right. I'll get it. And I'll read it on my travels.
Cool. Well, lovely to meet you. Oh, I've got to thank Richard Pronger because he's the one who introduced us. He said he bumped into you in Rye in a what was it, a cafe, a health shop in Rye.
Oh, yeah. Right.
So yes. Richard's one of my subscribers, and he emailed me and said, "You need to speak to this guy." And I went on your site and I went, "Yes, I do." And that's when I emailed you.
Yeah, this is happening to me more and more. I won't name names, but there's quite a big name that's got a subscriber that said to this big name, you need to interview David. And this big name said, yeah, I will.
Well,
so I've got
it's a team. This is the spiritual aspect to this. It's a team job because all the subscribers to my channel are doing as much work as we are.
Yeah.
Even if they're not on YouTube.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a team effort. Totally.
Yeah. Good. Well, good luck with the talks. I will speak to you soon.
Fantastic. Look forward to it, Mark. And I'll see you at the monastery.
Yeah, fantastic. Cheers, David.
All right.
Bye, everybody.